Welcome to the Mindful You podcast, brought to you by the Mindful University Project at the University of Rochester. Our mission is to cultivate presence, compassion, and well being by integrating mindfulness and contemplative practices into campus life.
We offer practices such as yoga, meditation, retreats, trainings, and other initiatives to support students, faculty, and staff.
Through this podcast, we share mindfulness journeys and insights on how being present can support mental health, focus, and resilience. Thank you for joining us. Let's explore how mindfulness can transform our lives together.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mindful University Project podcast. My name is Rebecca Block. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the director of the Mindful University Project. And today I am really happy to be able to have on the podcast Shamus and Sean, who offer our sound bath and acupuncture events at the University of Rochester. So we'll give them a little moment just to introduce themselves.
I can kick us off. Thank you so much, Rebecca. My name is Sean Mulligan. I do a lot of work with the university to offer sound baths and other sort of sound healing modalities. I studied viola at the Eastman School of Music, and since graduation, I did a Take 5 in global storytelling, and that really led me to exploring sound outside of the sort of Western soundscape. And so I studied with another Eastman alum, Adrian DiMatteo. He studied with Tito La Rosa. So just learning the traditions of South America to bring that sound healing back to our university. So that's kind of what I've been up to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks as well for having us in. We really appreciate this. I'm Shamus Clancy. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I've been practicing for about 10 years or so. I went to the Finger Lakes School of Acupuncture out on Cayuga Lake and did my herbal studies in Philadelphia at the Wan Institute. Of herbal studies and did my doctorate at the Pacific College of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. And I practice here in Rochester. I practice a classical style of acupuncture, classical Chinese medicine, and as well as a bunch of other modalities, body work, herbal medicine, and things along those lines. So yeah, I love treating stress, love treating pain, and just basically just helping people get to feeling comfortable in their bodies and their minds.
And so I'm very grateful to have you both on the podcast as well as on the team at the Mindful University Project. We're really passionate of providing a lot of students and faculty and staff with a variety of different mind-body practices. And so acupuncture and sound bath healing, we'll be talking a little bit more today and what that is. So Seamus and Sean, can you share a little bit more about your background and what led you truly to this work?
I guess I can start with this one. Yeah, for me it's interesting. I mean, since I was just a little baby, I think is when it started. When the seed started. My dad used to play an old show. I think it was from the '70s. It was called Kung Fu, and looking back on it, it's a super cheesy show, but it's still it's lovely in its own ways. And I think that probably started the planted the original seed. And up and through I was about 10 years old, I really, for whatever reason, was really interested in Eastern philosophies and Eastern things. And I was lucky when I was about 14 years old, an acupuncture clinic opened up across the street from my house. Not even a stone's throw, a little stone's toss. It was about a little alleyway, about 10 feet next door. And I sort of started hanging out with those folks and asking them lots of questions and probably being like generally fairly annoying to them, but they were lovely to me and they were always supportive of my interest. And it was around that time. By the time I was about 16, I decided that acupuncture was what I wanted to do in life. But at that time, there weren't a lot of schools locally, and as a younger kid graduating high school, I didn't really know how to pick up and just move across country to go to California to start school. So, I did a little bit of life first. I practiced, I played a lot of music, did a lot of music production, repaired chimneys for a long time, and spent about 15 years doing organic farming, working with local distributors and creating nice small loops within the sort of Ithaca and upstate New York farming community. And all that kind of culminated, towards the moment where I decided to go finally go to acupuncture school. The Finger Lake School opened up in about 2007, so it was a couple of years after that I decided to fully go for it. And yeah, I graduated about 2016 and have been practicing ever since. And yeah, I love being here in Rochester, part of this community, and that's kind of how I got to this point.
That's really cool to hear about. I actually only recently saw an episode of Kung Fu from another friend of mine. I had never heard of it before, and I saw it. But I can see where the it's a big thing is like he always has those aphorisms, or like moral kind of this is what the episode was about things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I could see that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
awesome.
Well, viola, I mean, music for me, I grew up in Rising Sun, Maryland, which was sort of like my parents were from Dublin, though, so it was just this sort of immigrant town amongst like a rural United States community. And so, like, music really was like it was identity. It was something to do when there was nothing else, to do. Um, but then, as I realized, in school at Eastman, I kind of always had this idea that music was just one sort of part of something that would be hopefully enriching on multiple levels. And so when I graduated, I was very fortunate to have the mentorship of a lady named Galen McCormick. She does just some amazing work. And she suggested to me to check out, sound baths through the indigenous traditions of Peru with Tito La Rosa and Adrian. But she also encouraged me to check out music therapy and like other forms of healing modalities. Eastman Performing Arts Medicine, where we go and provide just a sort of positive distraction, really, from just some of the things that people have to face when they're in a hospital setting. And yeah, it really redefined how the idea of like co-authorship rather than, we have one audience and people are listening. It kind of all fell into itself, so now I play for EPAM and I've studied with Adrian. Now we offer sound baths and it's an opportunity to kind of share music and be the artist I'd hoped to be. But for me personally, it goes beyond just the dynamics of a traditional concert hall, and hopefully offering ways. I see it like brushing our teeth. If we get a little bit of music in our life, a little bit of steady beat, it can go a long way. So that's how I kind of came to this work. I owe a lot to some mentorship that I've had, but also this calling. How can I use music to enrich other areas of life as well? So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing about your journeys. And I'm sure there's more that you didn't explain. Oftentimes, getting into these healing modalities, people go through a lot of different transitions and also changes. And so it's really wonderful that you both found your calling in these areas and now able to share it with your populations that you serve as well as University of Rochester students. So for those of you listening who may be new to this, we're going to explain a little bit about what a sound bath is and what acupuncture is. So Shamus and Sean, could you explain a little bit more about what they could expect?
You want to kick this one off, Sean?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so a sound bath, that's just one name for it. Really, it's a collaborative experience of sharing sound in the moment. And in how it looks like often you have participants who they're participating actively through listening. So and it's not so much a performance as much as an offering from the facilitator. And so what the facilitator does is they'll use a handful of instruments. We have anything from a shruti box to a viola, a guitar, and they will manipulate these instruments and the sound waves these instruments make to sort of just encourage soundscapes that encourage reflection and relaxation. A steady, calm beat can slow the heart, and entrainment can relax us. But also this idea of co-authorship and experienced sound. In the moment, when somebody hears a sound that they relate to, this could be the very first time that they hear themselves mirrored back, but without judgment attached to it. And to do this in a shared moment can be very powerful, can create a lot of sense of belonging and it's just overall great for any sort of cognitive, social, emotional, or even just physical relaxation. So that's kind of what you can expect, and usually they run, at least the way we do them, around anywhere from a half hour to an hour of sort of setting a container and then receiving and sharing sound, and then wrapping up. And it's just lovely. We used to. Last thing I'll say on this is that I used to tell everyone like, "Oh, music's the least invasive medicine," but it's actually, because it's a mechanical wave, it is the most invasive. Um, but this idea, that sound can be used to sort of organize ourselves, bring organization to chaos, out of the chaos, or meaning to things that for us struggle to have meaning. It can be very powerful. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well put. And I think acupuncture is a really great addition to the sound. It's also too, it's a very gentle intervention, but with that similar to Sean, how you're saying that, music is not invasive yet it's the most invasive thing. I mean, after all, with acupuncture, you are getting a needle inserted into your body, which in its own way is an invasive process, but it's a very gentle process as well, and it works so well with the music because a lot of what we're doing with acupuncture is, helping people tune more into interoception. So it's helping people tune more into their inner landscape. And when you get acupuncture, and we can talk about this a little bit more later as well, but in a sense, we're kind of causing a controlled acute stress response in a way. You're getting a needle inserted in your body in a very gentle way, but your body's very aware of what's happening. And that's part of what's really great about it because, it can kind of acupuncture can take you sort of out of that mental headspace that we spend a lot of time in and really put you in your body. And when you have acupuncture needles inserted in your body, you're really paying attention to what you're feeling, and that has a way of amplifying what you're feeling with the music as well. So you wouldn't necessarily think of acupuncture and sound as being two things that would come together and work well together, but it's amazing for that. So it really enhances what you're feeling with the actual mechanical waves, with the actual music that's happening in the room. And along with it being the music being super relaxing, acupuncture has a way of sort of kind of modulating your body's internal pharmacy. So, you're basically, regulating dopamine, you're releasing endorphins, and all of this really good stuff that would happen if you had an injury without actually having an injury. So you're regulating a lot of your systems. You're down regulating your autonomic nervous system. So all these things together, in an experience in a room for, as Sean was saying, anywhere from a half an hour to an hour can be a really profound experience. And I think that the two work really well together.
Thanks so much for sharing about what students can really come to a session and really look for when they're coming. So you talked a little bit about this. Could you explain a little bit more about the science or philosophy behind your modality and how it may support physical and emotional well-being?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can.
I can jump in on this one
Go ahead.
if you like, Sean, to start. Without going too far into depth, I mean, one of the really cool things about acupuncture, I think, is that you can look at it through different lenses. Sort of, alluding to that, there's a very physiological thing that happens with it. So there's definitely a scientific side, and the more that we're, spending time looking at acupuncture and doing more research, we're starting to realize the mechanisms that are happening with acupuncture and what's actually happening in the body. And then you can also look at the philosophical side of it. You can look at things through the Eastern lens, which I love, and I could spend the next 5 hours and take up this entire podcast doing, which I won't do, I promise. But there are three distinct philosophies that kind of brought acupuncture into being. Taoism is sort of the first one, and that doesn't mean that it's a religious practice. It's actually not at all. But what happened, at the origins of acupuncture, and it actually started with qigong, with actual just movement. So it probably really started with ecstatic dance, just moving. That's where things really began. And then herbal medicine came after that, and actual acupuncture came after both of those. But what was happening essentially is that people were just observing nature and then observing how nature manifests in the body. And that begins with yin yang theory. So you think about that little symbol that's on the surfboard, and it's a fun little symbol, but it's actually pretty profound and it goes pretty deep. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with acupuncture is to sort of balance the aspects of yin and yang in the body. And when you start getting into yin yang theory, you see that it exists in everything. You can see yin yang theory in science, you can see it in music, and just your basic day-to-day experience. You see it, kind of see it everywhere. But so we, through the philosophical side, we, through the Eastern lens, we're looking at different dynamics that exist in nature and how they express in the body. And that could be things like, like fire, water, earth, all these different things. And, obviously we don't have fire in our body, although spontaneous combustion, I think, I don't know if that's ever been proven scientifically, but we're looking more at the dynamics. So, you think of things like you could think of fire in a sense of, like, an example would be stress, since we're talking about stress a little bit. When stress is to the extreme and, someone's really at the point of burnout and people are really, you might know somebody or have experienced it yourself where you're kind of at that point where a stressor comes and then all of a sudden you just have this uprushing of, you have blood flow start to happen to your brain, you have the adrenaline hit, the stress response start, and you have this up, sort of uprising of energy. When it's at the very extreme, you might have people have outbursts, and you might even have people have, styes in their eye, or even like, sort of blood flow to their eye. And that's an expression how maybe fire would express through the body. So, we look at all these different things. We look at things like, water, like in when things are balanced, the physiology of water works well. When it's unbalanced, you might get things like dampness. And so dampness would be an expression of like bloating and, like, retaining water and things like that. So, some from that lens, we're sort of looking at, we're looking at these dynamics of nature and how they're expressing. And, that's just one way of talking about it. Physiologically, there's ways of talking about it as well. And I kind of, mentioned it a little bit before, but, basically what's happening with the science of acupuncture is that, like I said, we're kind of causing an acute controlled stress response in the body. So we're getting your, well, in a way, almost kind of tricking your body to go into the parasympathetic sort of rest and digest place, rest and restore, if you like. So it's, yeah, there's really interesting ways to sort of talk about both, and, and I won't go too much further into it because, like I said, I could go on forever. But yeah, it scientifically and philosophically, there are definitely very interesting ways to examine it.
I just want to piggyback off of what Seamus said about nature, um, with sound. And I would say in this context, sound and feeling, so being the vibration that sounds create, are the same thing. And so when we're thinking about creating a soundscape, a native flute, for example, might be used to emulate sounds of a bird or the foliage dried out and tied together. We use a leaf called chacapa from Brazil. This, when shaken, can sound like wings flapping or air passing through leaves, and it is this sense of belonging created through the senses, or emulated through the senses. We have an ocean drum. If we want to transport someone to the edge of the ocean, and what those memories could hold. So from a an emotional and a cognitive perspective, music, you can look at Bruce Shaw, music therapist, Gardstrom, a really wonderful clinical music improviser. They really highlight how mood, we can match mood with music, we can emulate it, and then we can shift it, but we can also honor it. And so I think with sound baths, we have an opportunity to help regulate mood. We have an opportunity to maybe not, a sound bath may not cure a disease, but it can change that experience of it. It can give it new meaning. And I find with our sound baths, so much of it too is that I mentioned frequently, like South America, Tito La Rosa, that tradition. But I bring to it myself, and you know, I'm not from that tradition. I don't try to be from something I'm not, but I am Irish, and so we do our best to provide context and honor those traditions, and then also bring some of our own. So really, what I'm getting at is this idea of identity, and where music so often it can create a place of identity where a conversation of pathologizing or can otherwise dominate. So what a sound bath does sonically is it offers opportunities for people to just identify and in a shared experience. So you have that social aspect as well. And with the relationship of the facilitator, you have the relationship we have with the music. We have the relationship that the participant has with the music, and then we have the music itself, and then the relationship that facilitator. So you have this very protected triad or pyramid of just of of like a shared uh, sound experience, which I think the act of co-authorship. I mean, how often have we had a music lesson where a teacher was just telling us what to do, you know? And there's no place of us in that. Whereas a sound bath offers that opportunity for active listening, for shared collaborative sound, shared engagement, but co-authorship, which I think that alone just breeds belonging, which I think is the very beginning of any sort of healing modality. Um, and so to hear that acupuncture ties in nicely with the natural aspects of it, it's pretty cool. It's cool, it's just very complimentary, really.
It is, yes.
And so, can you talk more about how these sound baths and acupuncture can support college students navigating stress, anxiety, or burnout?
If I may, I would just like to go back to the analogy of brushing my teeth. Um, and then also, and I don't really like this analogy a whole lot, but it's a useful one, and it's from a writer. I think it was John Cheever. He said, I'm probably misquoting this, but basically he says, if you have a gun in the first act, it's probably going to go off in the second act. I don't like that saying, but I think of it, if you put a drum in the first act, what could happen in the second act? What happens to a space when you just put a musical instrument? What happens to a person when you give them an instrument that they can play? Very easy to play and a wonderful sound, something like a shruti box. So when I think about my relationship with music, I think about also all the musical wounds. So if we can give students
John,
ways.
sorry for a second. I think we may have missed you for a second.
Oh, that's fine. Can
Okay.
you hear me now?
Yeah, me have to go back a little bit.
I think
Sure.
we lost you at wounds, I think.
Wounds. Yeah. So what I mean to say is if I'm a firm believer, if we do something in music, we'll do it outside of music, and likewise. And so if we are able to give students an opportunity to just reevaluate the experience and relationship they have with music, we think a lot about what we eat, we think a lot about what we wear. Do we think about what we hear every day? What is our sound diet? And I think of brushing teeth, like, have I kept a steady beat for 30 seconds, in a day? Have I given my heart a chance to experience, that as well? So hopefully a sound bath is not just an hour where people can relax and be with other people experiencing this very focused, like reflective and relaxing experience. But hopefully it's going to empower students with tools that they can change their relationship with music in a way that maybe just listening to a pre-recorded playlist that they made themselves doing a stressful thing is going to help them do that thing. Maybe shaking a maraca for 3 minutes a day is just going to regulate their mood. It's this stuff is for real. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think too, it's in the world that we're living in. I mean, we're so caught up in digital algorithms all the time, and it's and sometimes like Sean, you mentioned you considering a diet and what kind of music is coming into into your life. I think also just considering like, an information diet as well, what type of information is coming into our minds pretty constantly now. I mean, it's a pretty constant stream of information that's coming in. And I think that looking at information as a diet as well is a super important thing. I mean, you think about it, it's, a lot of us, and I work on this a lot myself, but on bad days, I wake up and I'm looking at my phone first thing in the morning, and then I realize at the end of the day, I've had information coming into my mind the entire day, and I'm listening to a podcast as I'm going to sleep, and really considering like, what's coming in. And I think with these acupuncture sound baths, it's a really great break for students for whether it's a half an hour or an hour to really think about, what this information diet's consisting of. And it's rare that we have a chance for a half an hour or an hour to really cut out the digital algorithms and, just take in an analog experience. And really just be present with other people, be present with, with moving sound waves, be present with, that interoception, your own inner landscape, in a really healthy way, in a way that's, I mean, that's one of the great things about acupuncture and about, about sound as well. The way that we do it at the sound baths is that, it's, with acupuncture, it's like I said, it's almost kind of like you're almost, I mean, there's all of the Eastern stuff, but then there's also the physiological sort of trick that's happening, and students will often find, and, people who come into the clinic often find that, it's you don't you kind of have, people will come in and, even, at, events at schools and things, there's a sense of anxiety almost at the beginning. It's like, okay, wait a second. So, am I going to be able to use my phone? Are my hands going to be free? And there's a moment where there's this anxiety and, and then after a few minutes of just sitting there and after a few minutes of, whether it's just acupuncture or whether it's sound, people go into this, your body sort of goes into the parasympathetic state, and then all of that's forgotten, and then, people are often very surprised that they were able to just relax for a half an hour to 40 minutes without having to think about anything. So I think that's like, one of the really great things that this combination, this combination of modalities can offer students, who are experiencing a lot of stress.
I know, like, even just from my experience of being in one of your sessions, just because I really like to get a flavor of what all the students are experiencing. And it's like an immediate like reaction that I have that really helps calm the nervous system. Like I've got an acupuncture and then sound bath separately and together. It's just a really amazing offering that I'm really grateful that we're able to offer students. So I know you mentioned this a little bit in the sessions, but for those students who may not be like super interested in just like signing up immediately, they may have some nervousness or skepticism. What would you say to students who are nervous or skeptical about trying sound healing or acupuncture for the first time?
I guess I can jump into this one since, with acupuncture, there does seem to be a lot of nervousness for a lot of people. I mean, in our culture, and I'm sure other cultures, we sort of have these stigmas around needles, which is totally understandable. Actually, bizarrely, I have a needle phobia, and becoming an acupuncturist was kind of a strange. Yeah, you as well. Yeah, a lot of us do. I mean, it's, and it makes sense. I mean, it's, when we're kids, we get shots and they hurt, and so we start to think that needles are bad. And there's a big difference between hypodermic needles and acupuncture needles. Hypodermic needles, they're serrated, they're sharp, and they have to be because they're either drawing blood or they're giving medicine. With acupuncture needles, they're ultra fine. So you can fit about 10, depending on the gauge of needle you're using, you can fit about 10 to 20 in the head of a hypodermic needle. So they're very tiny little things, and that's usually the big hurdle for people coming to get acupuncture. And once you sort of realize that, most people when they get the first needle inserted, and I should have pulled out a needle right now to show you, but basically what we do is, we sort of, I'll be palpating for the point. I find the point, I use a little guide tube, and I just tap the needle in super quick. And usually that's all you feel is just a tap when it happens. Occasionally, maybe one out of every 100 times, you might feel a little tiny pinch that goes away after a few seconds. But with this particular style of acupuncture, it's a really gentle style. The needles are very, very superficial, and in most cases, someone gets their first needle and they don't even know it went in. They're like, "Wait, has it been inserted yet?" And they're like, "Oh, that's all it is." And then after that, it's easy. And it's great for these sessions too, because, most of the time people are laying on their backs and, I might do points where you don't even see them go in. I might start on the top of the head and you just feel a little tap and then it's good. And you don't have to look at the needles. That helps a lot. And, oddly enough, it sounds strange, but, acupuncture has actually helped a lot of patients that I have get over needle phobias. It's helped me as well. So that's something people can look forward to. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest source of anxiety with acupuncture. As far as skepticism, I mean, and this kind of goes along with, sort of myths and misunderstandings about acupuncture. I think that there's a sense that people get this idea that it's sort of a mystical thing, because we have, you hear about these concepts like chi and things like that. And it's really not a mystical thing at all. I mean, the concept of chi, it seems like it seems like something that's sort of out there because it's not part of our culture in America. But in East Asia, chi is just part of the culture. When you look at the character of chi, it's a pot of rice with steam coming off it, and that character is part of many other characters as well. You will find the character for chi in the character for gasoline. So it's just a matter of just sort of action and act in sort of the active aspect. So, I think that for some people that's a difficult thing because they don't want to engage in something that seems like mystical or something that along those lines. But yeah, like as saying before, there's a really sort of just biomedical physiological thing that's happening with acupuncture. And certainly, there are lots of different styles of acupuncture. There are people who really go out into that mystical side of it, and that's great for people who are looking for that. And then there's a whole spectrum. There's the side of it where you're just doing, people have heard of dry needling, which is essentially just orthopedic acupuncture, where it's just a nuts and bolts thing. We're going in and we don't do this in our sound sessions, but, we're going in and just, releasing a trapped muscle, hitting a trigger point and releasing that. So, yeah, I think those are some of the skepticisms that come along with acupuncture. And now as we're kind of getting acupuncture is becoming more part of the mainstream, and mainstream allopathic medicine is looking for more ways to help with stress and more ways to help with pain. There's people are looking more at acupuncture, and acupuncture being an evidence-based medicine, there's more research that's starting to go into it. Again, looking at what the mechanisms are. So there's definitely a skepticism there, but people can feel comfortable knowing that there's actually a lot of science behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for students, what I would say about a sound bath and the acupuncture experience is that the if you're experiencing anxiety, and you want an experience that could potentially reduce that anxiety with pretty much non-existent symptoms, from it. There's not really much symptomage that could, I think, occur. I don't want to speak on the part of the acupuncture, but um, I say that with care because music is a powerful thing, but really it's all to say it's sort of a low stakes opportunity just to engage in a community anyway. And if anything, at best, it's an hour long nap you've given yourself while people take care of you. So yeah, I will also say that you mentioned unlocking muscles. Sound, it is proven that we can look at works like The Body Keeps Count, where emotions and memories and experiences can be trapped inside of the body. And so sometimes something such as activating the voice can free that up. And so doing something like acupuncture, doing something like music that is vibration based, and it's not alternative, right? It's adjunct to the care that we're providing elsewhere. So I would say, you really have nothing to lose except an hour,
Yeah.
you know.
Thanks so much for sharing. I think that's really important for students to know about, especially given healing modalities sometimes have more skepticism, but a lot of this is grounded in research. And so this is why we're really excited to have this at U of R because we're really focused on providing evidence-based practices for students to really help their well-being. So, with skepticism, going more into myths, I'm curious if you could share any common myths or misunderstandings about these practices that you'd like to clear up if you haven't already explained it in the initial question.
Yeah, I suppose I could, I think I probably touched on a lot of this. I could circle back around a little bit. I think, one of the myths with acupuncture, beyond what I mentioned already, and kind of touched on it a little bit, is that acupuncture is painful. Like I was saying before, when it's done, especially in the way that we do it in these sessions, it's a really gentle application of acupuncture. I have friends. A good friend of mine treats the Buffalo Bills, and those sessions, those might be a little bit more intense. I mean, we're treating massive muscle groups and guys who have to get ready for Monday Night Football. But it's if when acupuncture is done right and it's done with the right techniques, it shouldn't be painful at all. It's not to say that it's sensationless. And that's kind of, and in a way, that's part of the fun of acupuncture. It's actually what a lot of people really love about getting an acupuncture session. And it goes along with, with this idea of interoception. It really, like I said it before, it brings you out of that mental state and brings you into your body. And so, while it's not painful, you do feel really interesting things happen, and that and the music adds a lot to that as well. People might feel tingling at points. A lot of people will experience sensations like almost like pearls kind of moving around a point. You might feel things connect in your body. But overall, typically, you feel your body relax. Sean was saying, along with the music, your muscles start to relax. But yeah, I think that's one of the big myths and misconceptions is that acupuncture is painful. And that just goes along with our sort of stigmas and our experience with needles in our culture. But yeah, that's one of the big ones.
Yeah, especially as a fellow needle fearer, I had no fear when I had acupuncture because it was really great. Like practitioners are really great at introducing it to you, making sure that you feel safe. And when it happens, you barely feel it, which is really great to know that that misconception is actually not true.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, a lot of the folks that come in that are most scared of needles are covered in tattoos. So
Yep, yep.
once they realize that it's nothing like that, they're good to go.
That is so funny. Yeah, if I thought that acupuncture was going to be like a tattoo, not sure if that
No.
would relax me. um, in terms of misconceptions, I think that first and foremost, a sound bath, um, w- human beings, we're always processing information. We are information processors, and we can process that verbally, or we can process it musically. It's just one more form of processing, and again, it's a form that maybe comes without judgment. It's a different. It's when people say, "I don't have the words." Music can give you something that you can't describe with the words, but it's still a sort of form of information processing. So I would say, is music going to maybe eradicate a disease? Well, it can certainly help build motivational skills and help you regulate mood, and it can change the experience of working with that. Music has even been used to help people recover from strokes. But in the context of sound bath, we're looking at it as music as therapy. So while it might not necessarily be working on non-musical goals, but through music, it's the musical experience is the therapy. The musical experience is the form of processing. And so I just would say that, like, in terms of clearing that up, I think often, what can happen, and it's sad to see, is that the real cultural aspect, the real identity aspect of some of the modalities of care, such as using a chacapa and some Florida water to just, reset somebody. That kind of thing can be taken out of context and then scrutinized or made to look like, oh well, how will that ever solve somebody's pneumonia? But that's not what it's about in that moment. And so hopefully this is just an opportunity to reintroduce identity as central to care, and yeah, just sound baths, they wouldn't necessarily be music therapy, but they would be sound and music as a form of, therapeutic processing and that. So yeah. So
And so, what's really fascinating is all these modalities are really targeting stress. And so, we know that stress really impacts the immune system and also our emotional well-being. And so, it makes a lot of sense why these practices can be so healing for individuals. And so, it's wonderful that there's so many different healing modalities because one is not going to fix everybody's problems. And so, by offering a variety and array of different healing modalities, we have the opportunity then for people to try on different practices and see how it resonates for them. And so we know through research these practices are really effective. And so um, I know that you both have been in this field for a while. You oftentimes offer these practices. You got really passionate about it and began doing this for your own profession. And I'm just curious about what advice you would give to somebody who's interested in learning more or getting started with these techniques. Maybe it's similar to your experience with getting involved.
I know that like with acupuncture, there are schools of things and thoughts, and I don't want to speak for that so much, but I will say that like what I'm doing now, I did not necessarily learn in school. Many skills I learned in school prepared me for what I'm doing now, but I didn't. There was nobody really who sat me down and taught me that this was a possibility. So what I needed to do when I got out of school was to find a new community and new mentors who were going to help shape the visions that I had but couldn't yet articulate. So for new students, I would say the best thing you can do is find yourself a Rebecca, find yourself a Shamus, people have who understand the experience that you're in, but come from enough of a different perspective that they're going to help guide and shape you and give you feedback so that you're not just it's a very reciprocal like growth, and it shapes you into really, you're like, one day you'll be like, wait, I've actually already been doing what I've been hoping to do for a while now. I hope that answered that kind of, that's what I would say. Find people you can trust and who believe in you.
I think that is so important advice because I think a lot of us get into these fields because we are so inspired by a specific teacher. And so finding those specific teachers can be truly transformative and completely change people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say on the acupuncture side, if someone's interested in becoming an acupuncturist, like I was mentioning before, really a spectrum of how you can practice acupuncture. I mean, if you're, just really kind of go within and sort of decide what type of acupuncturist you think you want to be. If you're really drawn to the orthopedic side of things, again, find mentors and find people to talk to who are in that side of it. And, they'll really help you find a school that's a good fit for you. If you're really interested in like the sort of more esoteric side, then you can certainly go that way. There's lots of different schools that specialize in different things. I didn't really realize that going into acupuncture school, and it may not have mattered. I mean, I was really, as I said, I farmed for a lot of years in the Finger Lakes, and I'm really dedicated to this region, in a lot of different ways. So, I probably would have stayed here anyway, but I might have considered going to a different school if I really knew coming in that there were different styles, and I didn't know that when I first started. So yeah, I would say just, think about what style you want to practice and reach out to different acupuncturists. I mean, they will love to talk about it, because you go, I think one thing that's common amongst all acupuncture schools is it's kind of like boot camp. It's a pretty intense training, and you pack a lot of training and you pack a lot of education into it just a couple years. Um, my particular school, when I went to the Finger Lakes School of Acupuncture, was within the New York State Chiropractic College, and we did trimesters, and we went for about 3.5 years, and I decided to do the herbal training as well, and then decided to do the doctorate as well. And you might find a school. I went to 3 different schools to do all that, but you might find a school that's perfect for you to do all of those in one. And either way, it's a big commitment. And so just, going into it, if you can really have your intentions set from the beginning and find the right fit for you, then that's the best way to do it. And, like Sean was saying as well, I think this is probably true for a lot of degrees that you might get, is that you get basic training. And then really it's like once you get done and once you get out, that's when you can start getting into the juicy stuff. That's when you can do continued education. That's when you can start doing different training courses. And that's when it gets really fun. So yeah, there's definitely different paths, but reach out to practitioners. Almost every acupuncturist I know loves to talk about acupuncture. So they'll I'm sure would love to give you advice if you're interested in heading down that path.
Thanks so much. I think that advice is really helpful if people want to get into more of these practices for maybe more self-exploration or even for their own profession later.
Yeah.
So, are there any simple sound healing or acupressure techniques students can try at home or during stressful times?
I got one, and you don't even have to play an instrument to do it. It's lovely. If you take some music, like take a song, for example, could be a song that you're familiar with, or just like, Spotify, whatever they threw you that day, or SoundCloud. but um, but basically, what you do is you you listen to the piece of music, and you either, I think, you draw, or you do a different modality. So you can dance and record yourself, or you can draw. But you listen to that song and you have that, and then you just do that again, but you record yourself again, and then you watch the difference between the two recordings, or you look at the difference between the two pictures, and then you just journal about it. So I would say to anybody, take 5-10 minutes, listen to a song. Maybe it's "Take It Easy" by the Eagles, and just free associate sketch while you're listening to it, and then do it one more time and compare the two sketches and see how you felt versus the first sketch, and then see how you felt versus the second sketch. And what hopefully we've realized by the end of it is that we've just processed, something. Yeah, you can do that. If it's not a song, you can just decide how do you feel that day, and then you're just gonna draw or listen to a piece of music based off that and do the same thing. So yeah, I
Yeah,
find
that
that to
that's
be.
super. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to. I've never thought of that. I'm gonna have to try that. I didn't know you were an Eagles fan. I love the Eagles.
It's
Um,
funny. I'm actually not necessarily, but then you listen to music in this new way, and you're like, wait a minute, that harmony just got me to realize, like, that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a couple things I can think of off the bat. I wish we had more time because Qigong is a really amazing thing that you can do. Really easy practice you can do pretty much at any time. I mean, there's moving aspects you can do if you have some more space. There are aspects of Qigong that you can do when you're just sitting and no one will even know that what you're doing. And Qigong is basically so. If you think of going back to Kung Fu. Another way to pronounce kung fu is gung fu, and gung just means work. And so with kung fu, fu means achievement. So kung fu essentially is achievement through hard work. And so qigong is basically just working with qi. And again, I know it gets into that sort of metaphysical, mystical stuff, but there are some really great things you can do. But basically, if you want to, if you're just sitting in one spot, and you can't really see how I'm sitting, but there's where my hands are. But if you go about 2 inches below your navel and then 2 inches in, there's a thing that we call the dantian, and a lot of martial artists will use this. Yeah, Bruce Lee. You think of Bruce Lee was a fan of focusing on the dantian. And so what the dantian is, it's basically a point that you can center yourself at. So if you just kind of say, you can take your hands, you cross them however feels comfortable. So sort of have them like this and just place them below your navel. And then you can just sit and just breathe into that spot. A lot of times people will do sort of like counterclockwise or clockwise motions, depending on if you're trying to, release things or like, sort of build energy in your body. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like energy, in a metaphysical sense, but basically just a place of centering. You just kind of sit there, focus on that spot. And that again taps into this idea of interoception. So you're kind of taking yourself out of your mental mind state that you're in a lot, and then focusing it in a place in your body. And that can be a really profound practice, even if you just do it for 30 seconds. It doesn't take long at all. And that's along the lines of mindfulness and things, there's, ideas of like a formal practice, and then there's ideas of informal practices, and that can be considered just a formal practice. You really just in a sort of formal way, a really intentional way, you sit for 30 seconds and just focus on that spot, breathe into it, just really kind of center yourself there. And the more you practice that, the more the informal part of that starts to become present in your life. The more you can sort of like you really start to feel centered, whether you're stressed waiting for a coffee, whether you're taking an exam. That's a great point that you can just kind of place your intention and focus yourself. I'd say another really, really easy thing. This is really common in East Asia as well, especially among students. I mean, a lot of what we're doing with acupuncture is trying to sort of engage and, on the physiological lines is trying to engage and tone the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is a really cool nerve, which I could also sit and talk for hours and nerd out about. But there are branches of the vagus nerve that innervate into the ear. So a lot of times, and even sometimes in our sessions, I'll actually do points that are in the ear or in the outside of the ear, which I know sounds strange, but they're great points. But those access those branches of the vagus nerve. So well, you're obviously not going to put needles in your own ear while you're taking a test or, waiting for your coffee. What you can do is just massage your ears. And it sounds strange. You just kind of start at the top, you sort of work your way down, grab the lobe, sort of stretch the lobe out, and really just kind of get into it. You do it with both ears. I know it might look a little funny if you're sitting there taking a test, but you can kind of hide it, and pull on it, and that will engage and that will tone the vagus nerve a little bit. And it's as strange of a practice as it is. It's really relaxing. You feel yourself flushed with endorphins, and you regulate that dopamine and everything. So those are some quick little ones you can sneak in without even anyone really knowing what you're doing.
Since you mentioned the vagus nerve and it goes also through the throat, some
Hmm.
soft humming. So yeah, I suppose if
Yes.
you were just
Yeah.
you might feel really relaxed after a
Yeah,
while,
yeah, I was gonna mention humming too. That's a good one. I've never combined the two, but I'm gonna have to start now.
or energized.
I'll start doing that at Starbucks when I'm waiting for my
It's
coffee.
like we're blending the sound bath and acupuncture. Now you can begin to blend the vagus nerve with the vocal cords as well as the ear and that soft touch.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for all of these really awesome techniques that students can just begin to apply at any time. And so I'm just curious if you have any experiences that you've heard from students that they've reported after participating in one of these sessions. And so it may not have to be just at U of R, but also potentially some other students that you've engaged with.
Um, yeah, I feel always very lucky because like I say, it's not in the sense of a performance where there's a clear audience and a clear performer, and the attention is on the performer. It's an offering. It's a shared acceptance of this space, and so whenever that is the container that we create, and participants allow us to work within that space, it's always a huge privilege, and often emotions will come up. I've had students, we're offering them sound, and you can see tears coming down their face, not necessarily sad tears, sometimes just a release. And so i've had uh, I've had a lot of really just lucky experiences where people have really come to me afterwards. Come to specifically, actually, I think of the one that we did last at U of R, where we had, I think, 3 or 4 people at the end just really thanking us, and they were return students, and they were just saying that, not the idea of just that they got that time, but also your work, Rebecca, where they had something to look forward to. They knew it was on the schedule, and they knew that that experience would reset them. So they knew, if I'm dysregulated, at least in a week's time, I have this again. So really, the whole holistic, even down to the programming, it's quite thoughtful, and I'm just that would be my experience of it. I can say very lucky from that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great things, the great feedback that, sometimes we'll get with these, with acupuncture is that, I mean, a lot of us are kind of stuck in that like sympathetic sort of chronic stress state. And it's almost like a, sort of like a fish in a fishbowl. Like a fish isn't thinking about the fact that it's in water. And, a lot of times we don't think about the fact that we're in a stress state a lot because you start to get more resistance, you get more stress and then you learn to, sort of live with that stress. And then you don't really realize how much stress you're actually in all the time. And, it's really I really love to hear and to see when people come in and not even necessarily expecting to, but are able to go from that place and then, drop into that sort of parasympathetic rest and restore place and have forgotten what that place is actually like. I've kind of gotten out of the fishbowl for a moment and really just remembered what it's like to sort of like have that gone for a moment. And it may not last for, forever, but even just having that moment to remember what that's like and to have people, sort of express that they were able to tap into that place, I think is a really powerful thing because it helps people remember that that place is there and that there are ways to access that place. And and that brings people back to sort of say like, okay, here are these tools that help me. And, and maybe start to explore other tools and, can say, okay, yeah, that place is there. I know what it feels like. I remember what it feels like again. And, I can sort of actively, intentionally start to create more space in my life to kind of get out of that fishbowl and just remember what it feels like to sort of have that cleared for a while. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things to hear when people have that experience.
Yeah, I
I
think
just wanted to
it's,
say,
oh,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just want to say, Seamus, you reminded me when you're talking about those tools, because the sound bath, it's like a tangible, the tactile thing, right? Like people can come at the end and play with the instruments if they like. One of the biggest feedback that we hear is, "Oh, I really identified with that instrument,"
Mm.
and then often that person will ask, "Well, where did you find it? How can I get my own?" And suddenly we're empowering this person with something that maybe they haven't been home in 3 years, or maybe they're just really missing a part of themselves or something, and they can give that to themselves by simply hitting a triangle or shaking some chimes, things that are tactile, so
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I was gonna touch back on Seamus with what you were mentioning. I think a lot of us, we become an adult and we just become a human being. We oftentimes forget what it's like to be a human, or no, we become a human doing. We
Mm.
forget what it's like to be a human being. And so what I love about the offerings that we have is it really provides a space for students to pause, to literally just lay on the floor for an hour to listen to music, receive acupuncture, and really just take a pause. And so that's really difficult sometimes when you're living in such a busy state where you have a lot of deadlines. And so it's just such a beautiful thing that we're able to cultivate. And so students have always mentioned a lot about their appreciation about it. And I think a lot of it is just because we're offering this space, this scaffolded space for students to actually pause. And so, thank you so much for sharing like all the different components of sound baths and acupuncture, your healing journeys that you've gone through, also getting into these modalities and some of the science behind it. And so, if you have any last words that you want to share, feel free to let the audience know anything that you want to share, any updates that you have, or maybe upcoming events.
I would just say stay tuned for the fall. I think that's a big one. And also just thank you, big ups to Rebecca for making this space possible. I just think that that's so important. Part of the culture, we talked a little bit about how we're just doing and surviving. We like in the United States, especially in universities, this idea of survival and like survival is like you're resilient, that's the narrative. And this idea of like, well, actually no, yes, be resilient, but also develop ways of loving and caring for yourself, not as an extra thing, not as this like, oh, I'll get to do that someday, but baked into the culture and the process of what you do to be a successful student. I
Mhm.
think that that is the cultural change that is happening, and it's just really a privilege to be a part of it. So yeah, big
Very
ups.
grateful to have you a part of it.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be a part of it as well. And thank you for so much for bringing me into this.
Of course.
Um, Yeah, I think I guess if I had any sort of parting words and things to consider, I think going back to the sort of information diet and considering, the sort of world of digital algorithms that we're living in and considering where things are going. I mean, you look at things like artificial intelligence, and we're really on the cusp of major, major changes in the way we experience our reality and what it means to be a human. And I think it's going to be a really, really interesting transition period, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to really think about, what meaning is to us, what life means to us, and to really, kind of like you're saying, sort of make more time to pause, make more time to spend in nature, and really just consider that all of the information that's going into your mind at all times, and really, really try to spend more time looking at the algorithms of nature, just spending time with trees, listening to birds, creating that space and really sort of try to have more analog experiences, more tactile experiences because they're super important. Yeah, and I mean I think that's the biggest thing that's on my mind these days.
Mhm.
As far as things that are coming up, things that I have going on, Sean and I are working on making some music together. And a lot of that stuff I try to do, music is sort of where Sean and I connected first. And and Sean knows that I'm really super interested in like, sort of immersive music experiences. And at the clinic here, I'm in one of my private treatment rooms here, but we have a room in the basement. It's a big open room where we do community acupuncture. And I get super nerdy when it comes to spatial music. I like to, if you think of like you watch a movie and you see a movie in Dolby Atmos surround sound,
Mhm.
that's a platform that I love to make music in. And we have a room in the basement where I have speakers all around the whole room. It's almost like kind of like a home theater without, without a screen. But yeah, I'm doing a lot with that these days. I'm going to be offering sessions that are focused around sound and around music, with the acupuncture. So that's something to look out for. And yeah, just looking forward to the fall, looking forward to everything that's to come, and looking forward to getting deeper into what we're doing here at U of R and these sound and acupuncture experiences. And I really hope that anyone listening to this, we have a chance to meet you sometime soon.
Well, thank you so
Rebecca,
much for being on the podcast and really grateful to have you on our team. Sean, did you want to say something?
yeah, I was just gonna. I'm horrible for plugging things, but if anyone has
Oh,
any
good.
questions about what we do, you can always go to um, analogmusic.com for one, or if Seamus, what's your website's name?
Yeah, Acu 585. You were in the middle of doing a bit of a rebrand, but yeah, Acu 585 will always get you there. Real easy to remember.
Yeah, so that's the two things, and then stay tuned for Sound Bath album soon. So from both of us. So
Well, I'm very excited about that. That sounds amazing. And once all of this is out, definitely let us know so we can listen to it. So, all of the links that we mentioned, we'll put in the podcast notes so you can access them there. But definitely sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date about when our sound bath and acupuncture events will be in the fall, as well as all other Mindful You offerings. So thank you so much, Seamus and Sean, for being on the podcast today, and hope you all get to meet them sometime in the fall.
thanks
All
so
right.
much, Rebecca.
Thank you.